Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The U.S. Supreme Court lost one of its towering members this week. After nearly 30 years on the bench, Justice Antonin Scalia passed away during a hunting vacation in Texas at the age of 79. He was beloved by conservatives and criticized, sometimes brutally, by progressives. Still, he was respected by people on all sides of the ideological spectrum. His often scathing dissents were legendary, as was his wry sense of humor. What will be his lasting legacy? To discuss the work and the mind of Justice Scalia, we're joined by the learned hand professor of law at Harvard University, ANN GLENDON. ANN, thanks for being here.
It's a sad occasion, Raymond, but it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you about a towering figure in American law.
Why was he such a towering figure, ANN? I mean, some have dismissed him as a conservative. He's a conservative jurist, and that tells the tale. That really undercuts and undersells his importance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, the reason why he will be long considered to be one of the 2 or 3 greatest persons we've had on the U.S. Supreme Court is precisely that he followed a judicial method that makes it very difficult to cabin him with any label such as conservative. Or even, I would say, the words that he used himself sometime, originalist and textualist, don't really do justice to what he was. As soon as you put an ism at the end of a word, that suggests that he was some kind of fundamentalist, and nothing could be further from his judicial philosophy, which was a profound dedication to 2 things. First, to be true to the judicial oath that he swore to decide cases without respect to persons, that is, to be perfectly impartial, and to decide cases according to the laws and Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, no, he was, and he was so true to that. Often, when one peers and looks back, as I've been doing this week, when you look back at his rulings and the thoughts and the vision that informed those rulings, one is struck by the diversity, the surprises of his opinions. And I've got to share this with you. This is one of those cases that I think people will continue to read, and it gives you not only insight into his mind, but of course what the Constitution demands. It was that flag burning case in 1984. He was fairly new to the court, and he wanted to underscore the arbitrary nature of the Texas flag protection law. And he asked the consul, what other cherished symbols of the state would you like to protect from desecration? And he said, perhaps the state flower. And the courtroom erupted into hysterics. And later on, he continued sort of digging into this. He said, the only reason to burn the American flag is to express discontent with America. So by burning or banning flag burning, Texas was stifling an anti-American expression. And in response, the attorney who was arguing on behalf of Texas tried to argue that one might burn a flag to honor the country. Scalia instantly challenged her to describe a single instance where that might occur. This is typical Antonin Scalia, it seems to me.
Yes, and it's a perfect illustration of why it is so distorting to call him a conservative, to label him as a conservative. He disappointed many conservatives many times, not only in the flag burning case, but you can think of the shock that his decision in the Employment Division versus Smith case that religious freedom did not protect sacramental users of peyote. That was quite a surprise to many people. And of course, the many decisions where he upheld the rights of criminal defendants pleased many people who would call themselves liberals. So I think of him as most like, among all the justices, most like the other great justice, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who followed a judicial philosophy very similar to Justice Scalia's, let the chips fall where they may, be true to the Constitution's text, structure, and precedent.
And do you see that approach to the law and certainly to jurisprudence. Do you see that slipping away as you look at these other decisions that are being handed down and the politicization of the courts all over the country?
Well, what I see is that when Nino Scalia joined the Supreme Court, it was slipping away, seriously slipping away, and he came in sort of like a drill sergeant and forced not only the court, but advocates and legal academics to shape up, to be more rigorous in their reasoning, and to pay attention to the text. And I think after 30 years, we can say that an important part of his legacy is to have improved the quality of judicial reasoning.
Yeah, no doubt at all. I came across this funny quote, Marianne, because he was a Roman Catholic, and I'm going to play a little clip of him speaking at a National Catholic Prayer Breakfast here in D.C. But he didn't allow his Catholicism or his faith ever to get in the way of his ruling. Now, some have criticized him for this. Others have condemned him for being a Catholic and thought he brought those ideas to the bench. I'm going to play this little bite and then get your reaction.
I find it hard to understand the reasoning of those wise people who revere Thomas More as a saint rather than a world-class fool for dying to support the decision of Medici Pope Clement VII concerning King Henry's divorce of Catherine of Aragon, but who themselves ignore and indeed positively oppose the teachings of Pope Benedict on much more traditional and less politically charged subjects.
Marianne, you heard what he just said there. At the same time, Justice Scalia was firmly for the death penalty, even saying at a Pew Forum once, you want a fair death penalty? You kill, you die. That's fair. How did he keep those two things separate? The teachings of his church, being true to his church, and yet ruling where he thought he had to, even if it violated the tenets of his faith?
Well, first of all, I would defy anyone to find any direct influence of Catholic beliefs on his judicial decisions. He was a paragon of a certain kind of restraint that characterized Holmes and that is really required by the judicial oath. When he took the judicial oath, he didn't have his fingers crossed behind his back. And that restraint means you accept the limits imposed by the structure of our government, federalism and the separation of powers. You accept the limits imposed by the text and precedent, and you accept the personal limits of keeping your own opinions, biases out of the decision-making process. Nobody can do that perfectly, as he was the first person to say, but he was always careful to explain his decisions with reasons that are accessible to anyone. Now, you mentioned his view on the death penalty. Yeah. He thinks, he said in a speech that he gave in 2002 that he thought that part of Evangelium Vitae was an innovation that really was not supported by the tradition and the text. It's rather interesting. He used the same kind of argument that he would use when there were new rights suddenly found in the Constitution. If you want new rights, they've got to come through the ordinary democratic process. So he was full of surprises, but in a way that showed enormous integrity and fidelity to his principles. I do think that I was thinking about Catholic influence on him. And I think there is a way in which you could say being a Catholic did influence the kind of justice he was. And that is any Catholic who takes seriously the baptismal obligation to aspire to holiness and mission. That means you have to learn to discipline yourself to do really hard things. And I think a person who was brought up as Nino was, who lived as he did, was able to do what many judges find hard to do, and that is discipline himself to decide according to the laws and the Constitution.
Yeah. No, beautifully said. I want to talk about the outstanding cases, Marianne, in our final moments here. There are several outstanding cases before this court of real importance, certainly to this audience. One is the Texas restrictions on abortion, where the doctor has to have admitting privileges, the abortionist does, and they have to have medical personnel at the abortion clinic. This is under review. Without Antonin Scalia, which way do you see this going, as well as the big HHS contraceptive mandate case that is before the court?
Well, should that Texas case be decided 4-4, that decision will affirm the lower court decision, which was in favor of the regulations on abortion clinics. Mm-hmm. And so that decision will stand, but it will not stand as precedent. Mm-hmm. And as your audience knows, there are other states who have similar regulations, and certainly those regulations can be defended on the grounds of providing health protections for women. And I think that that when that case comes up again, perhaps in the context of testing one of those other statutes in other states, that there is a reasonable chance that those regulations will be upheld. Of course, a lot will depend on who is the next justice. Right. And of course, the Little Sisters of the Poor, that if that's a 4-4 decision, that will let the lower court decision stand, and that went against the Little Sisters. And that, of course, is an extremely important case, but it is not precedent, and the issue will not go away.
I need to play this for you. This is your former law student, President Barack Obama, talking about the type of justice he might appoint any day now. Listen to this.
Should we interpret your comments just now that you are likely to choose a moderate nominee? Would you consider?
No.
Okay.
I don't know where you found that. You shouldn't assume anything about the qualifications of the nominee, other than they're going to be well qualified.
Your thoughts on this, Marianne, and is the GOP in the Senate, the majority there that runs the Senate, are they correct, in your estimation, to come out and say, we're going to oppose any nominee, this president shouldn't be making these appointments now? The country's too divided.
Well, of course, it's very sad that we have come to a point in our politics where we cannot take the best jurist in the country and have him confirmed without any opposition, as Justice Scalia was, no votes against him. It's sad that we have reached this point. I think that's about all one can say about this sparring that goes on before Justice Scalia is even buried, this lining up on partisan lines about an appointment where I keep coming back to the judicial oath. All we want is somebody who can take that oath and mean it and live it the way Oliver Wendell Holmes did and the way Nino Scalia did for 30 years.
That's a perfect way to end this. Marianne Glendon, thank you so much for being here and for your searing analysis of not only the law, but of Nino Scalia's great legacy. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, Raymond. Thank you.